I recognize Senator Kaine for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Warren, and thank you to our witnesses. I think I'm going to make my comments maybe a little bit more for my colleagues, but also to share with these witnesses who are experts some frustrations I have and why I'm glad that the chair and ranking member have decided to do this hearing and then hopefully embrace others. I've been very frustrated in my 10 years on the committee about the absence of real analysis of major initiatives that we undertake within the Pentagon. And I'm just going to use two, military housing and then the formation of the DHA and the military medical services that Ms. Field discussed. The Pentagon made a decision, no doubt for both cost and quality reasons in the 1990s, to push a privatized housing model. It's not our core expertise. Why don't we let housing companies do it? It's not war fighting. Let others do it. And if they do it, they may be able to save us money and also offer higher quality accommodations to military members and families. It's been a pretty big failure. And I think the failure is more on the Pentagon side of the ledger even than the private provider side of the ledger, because the contracts that were set up gave the Pentagon significant oversight responsibility. So, for example, on a base, the base commander was to hold back payment till the end of the year to some certain percentage and then decide whether the provider had merited some or all or none of that payment based on performance. Instead, the pattern was essentially for the base commanders to just release all the money at year end regardless of performance. The contracts with the private providers were set up so that at some midpoint in these long-term contractual periods, the Pentagon could step back and do an assessment. Are you meeting the needs of our families? If not, we need to renegotiate the contract. That midpoint came, there was no renegotiation done, just steady state. It's now off our shoulders, so it's on the shoulders of these housing providers, and the housing providers weren't being incentivized to really treat our military family members the way that they would treat commercial clients, because all these providers also had commercial business. They treat their commercial clients better because they would leave and go somewhere else if they didn't, but they started to treat our military families sort of as hostages. We ended up making it worse. We had as a key theme to the NDA a few years ago, there was an effort to push cut in headquarters staff, a non-defined cross-the-board cut in headquarters staff without really digging into, well, wait, exactly who are headquarters staff? I fought very hard against an across-the-board headquarters staff cut. I was unsuccessful. A couple of years later, this housing thing blew up in our face, and we went back and looked at what was the headquarters staff that was cut. In all of the offices that were charged with the responsibility of overseeing these housing contracts, they were losing 30, 40, 50, 60% of their staff. And, you know, surprise, surprise, to quote a famous Marine, Gomer Pyle. Surprise, surprise, when you cut all the housing staff, suddenly the oversight gets worse and the quality gets worse. So a program that was designed to save money and a program that hopefully was going to lead to a better result ended up, frankly, probably doing neither. And we've had to come in, and we're making progress, but we're still not really where we are. We ought to have great both cost and quality tools to assess a program like this. Similarly, the different service branches had their own military expertise. The decision was made based on a study that was done in 2011 to try to put this together in a combined DHA. I still hear all kinds of constituent complaints from service members in Virginia and their families about waiting lists and insufficient access to services within the DHA. Ms. Field, you talked about areas where the DHA is spending more than they need to or having a hard time recruiting people into key positions. Where I hear about it is from my military members and their families who have a hard time getting access to services, particularly in the mental health space. We've had a raft of military suicides at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Maintenance Center in Norfolk and in ships that are in dry dock for extended periods, and often the availability of mental health services is weak. One of my staffers went on a carrier avail recently, and on the entire carrier there were 2 mental health psychologist positions for this huge group of people, and 1 was vacant. My staffer asked, okay, how long has this position been vacant? For a very long time. Well, what's the salary that you would pay this psychologist? The salary was $85,000. you would make so much more than that having a psychology practice in suburban Arlington or Virginia or virtually anywhere in the country, and you wouldn't have to be deployed on a carrier for months at a time away from your family. We're not going to fill that position at that salary. So these are two instances of big initiatives, transitioning healthcare into a DHA environment, transitioning housing from the military provides it to let's get the housing experts to do it. Both are continuing to show major problems. I'm not sure either really produce savings or produce better quality of service to our military men and women. And so I don't really have a question for you, but I guess Senator Scott asked me, do you have some issues that are on your mind that could inform future discussions? And I would like to know, when we embrace these major initiatives, how do we measure them to make sure they're doing what we say, and how do we maybe get hold of it quicker if it's going the wrong direction to turn it in a positive direction, rather than just keep investing in something that is not bearing out, as it should. So I'll just stop there. But I'm really happy that you're doing this, and I do want to make sure we focus on the dollars, but I also want to focus on the bang for the buck. And if the dollars aren't, are being wasted, and we're not getting the service that we need to either promote lethality or protect our people, then I think we got a lot of work to do, and I appreciate the committee for tackling this.
Thank you